All right, let's finally get this door flat drawn. If you're a total beginner, I'd recommend watching the previous video before doing this one. And we only got a rectangle on the page, but we covered a lot of important concepts that we're going to start using right now. And if you're a complete beginner, you're probably going to get lost pretty fast. So click on the link up in the corner. Okay, so open your document if you have closed it, and then use the scroll wheel and space bar to left drag and fill your screen with the 4x8 rectangle that we drew in the previous video. Okay, pop quiz for bonus points. What's another way that we could zoom right into that rectangle? Anybody remember? You can select it with the selection tool. That's the X key, remember? Select the rectangle and then click on the Fit to Objects button up in the view bar. Now smile with pride if you remember that. Okay, now, however you got there, zoom in so you can see the full rectangle on your screen. And now we need to add the door to the middle of our door flat. So there are a lot of ways that we could do that, but let's start with an easy one. Select the rectangle tool, like we used in the last video, from the basic tool palettes, or if you're very clever, you can hit the $4 key for the keyboard shortcut. And then now put the little crosshairs on the bottom left corner of the 4x8 rectangle. You should see the screen hint, bottom left, when you get close, and you can kind of see the cursor snap like a magnet to the corner. When you see that hint or the red box appear, you know that you are microscopically on top of that corner of the rectangle. There's no need to zoom in and check. It's one of the beauties of working in CAD. So click and move your cursor up and to the right slightly to start drawing a rectangle, just like before. Now hit your Tab key and in the Delta X field type 36 or 3 apostrophe, either way. And then hit Tab again and type in 7 apostrophe or 84 nothing, either way, it's the same thing. Enter or left click to say you're happy. Great, that's our door. Now check the object info palette to make sure that its width is 3'0" and its height is 7'0". If it is, then you're great. And if it's not, you know how to change it. Now we want to center the door in the middle of the flat. Because this math is easy, let's just use the move command. Okay, so the flat is 4 foot wide and the door is 3 foot. So to center it, we just need to move it over to the right 6 inches. Okay, so with the door rectangle selected, hit the X key and select it again if you deselected it. Now use the Control or Command M for move, so Control M, and then notice by default there is an X and a Y offset in this little pop-up window here. We don't want to move it up at all. Remember, X is side to side and Y is up and down, right? We want to move it to the right, so we're going to move it positively 6 inches in the X direction, right? Does that make sense? We're going to leave a 0 in the Y field. There needs to be something in both fields, even if it's a 0. So if you delete the number and you leave it blank, it won't work. It'll give you a little error beep. So you have to put something in both of those fields, even if it's 0. For now, all we need to do is hit 6 and enter, or click the OK button. And notice that you don't even need to move the mouse to do that. Tab and Enter will do the work for you in most of these simple dialog boxes. So look, it worked. Now our door is now centered in the flat. And you can follow along with this next example if you want, or you can just watch and learn. I'm going to Control Z to undo and put the door back in the corner and show you another way to do this. This is a good way to do this if the math isn't as easy as 3, 4, 6 like it just was. So Shift select the 4x8 rectangle so that we have both the door flat and the back rectangle selected. So both should have the orange highlights and you can see 2 rectangles listed up in the object info. So now you know you're ready. Okay, so right click on either of the rectangles. It has to be on one of the rectangles, doesn't matter which one. Right click on it and then enter and then select Align Distribute from the top, the pop-up, and Align Center from the flyout. Perfect. Now sometimes it's easier to see that command visually. So with 2 or more things selected, you can use Control equals. So Control or Command and then the equals button, like up by your backspace there. That's going to open up this little dialog box. It gives you a few more options and it lets you preview the results so you can kind of see what you're doing ahead of time. There's a couple of other ways to do this, but that's enough for now. Okay, so I just want to pause for a quick moment and let you know that we are keeping it very old school right now. Basically, we're just using CAD to replace our pencils and rulers and our drafting tables. We're just drawing pictures. Now, you might have explored ahead and found that there are wall and door and window and lots of many cool tools in the Building Shell Toolkit and other places. These are very powerful, and they're how designers and architects do this work with 3D models. but we're going to get to those in the future. Those tools are meant to work together in a 3D workspace. There are several steps ahead of where we are. So they aren't hard to use, but we just need to set them aside for the moment. So we're going to stick to old school drawing lines on the screen until you get the hang of this. Okay, all right. So now hit the X key twice to deselect both rectangles, or just click on a blank part of the screen. There's plenty of blank on the screen still. And now select just the door. Up in the object info, you should see the width and height fields reading 3 foot and 7 foot. Let's shrink our door down a bit, but without losing our nice centered position. Now remember that we looked at these 9 dots in the previous video, and remember that they correspond with the blue selection handles on the selected rectangle. So find the center bottom button over here in the object info and click on it. That's anchoring the bottom of the door and the center of the door. So now in the width field, replace 3 foot with 2'6", or 30. And when you hit enter, notice that the door has shrunk by 3 inches from both sides equally, keeping the door centered. Now if we change this with the bottom left button selected, then it would have taken the full 6 inches all from the right side. It's giving us our 2'6" door, but it would no longer be centered on the flat, and we'd have to recenter it. And now type 6'8", 6 foot 8 inches, into the height. Remember, you never need to type quotes for inches, just 6'8". Enter, and notice that the height of the door has shrunk by 4 inches, but it took it all from the top, leaving the bottom of the box alone, exactly how we wanted it. All right, so now let's add some trim around the door. And again, there's a dozen ways to do this, but let me show you a very handy tool, the offset tool. That's the one that kind of looks like a bow and an arrow. Unfortunately, the default keyboard shortcut is Shift and minus on the number pad. So if you don't have a number pad, it's not going to work. The minus above the letters doesn't work. So if you don't have a number pad, I'm giving you permission to click on this button. This tool is super useful, but it's not one that you're going to be using all the time. So you can click on the button. With the offset tool selected, notice that there are new options in the mode bar. Fortunately, the default settings are what we want. So unless you've been playing with this ahead of time, it's already set up the way we want. But let me show you quickly what these are. So offset by a specific distance is what we're going to do, in this case 4 inches. Or we can just click and drag manually to just kind of trombone it and just sort of see what we like. We can also duplicate the original, which is what we're going to do. Leave the door where it is and make another rectangle. Or we can just resize the first selected shape. So we can leave all of these alone if they are grayed out that way. And then just type 4 into the distance so we can get a 4-inch wide trim around our door. All right, so now if I click on the outside of the shape, like I'm going to do here, it draws a 3'2" by 7'4" rectangle on top of the first. So those numbers don't really matter because that's just a rectangle that's 8 inches bigger in both dimensions, or 4 inches all around than our first rectangle, giving us our 4-inch trim, right? But there's 2 small problems here that we need to fix. You may have noticed that when we draw shapes, they have a white fill in them, and then we're sort of stacking them one on top of each other, like we're cutting out shapes out of paper and stacking them up on a table. So our new door trim is on top of our door, and because the rectangle is bigger than the door, it's covering it up. And we can fix that with a quick command. So hold the B key down on your keyboard. I don't know why it's the B key. Because. It's B because. Hold on the B key, and that's the X-ray view. In other words, it's just taking all the fill out of the shapes so we can see the selections through them. Now hit the X key and select the door. And now you can let up on the B key. Use the command or the control command F. So Control F and send to front. All right, so now our door has moved up on top of the larger rectangle. If you don't remember the shortcut, you can right-click on a select object and find the Send menu. And notice that Control B is the command for Send to Back, if you want to put something at the bottom of your stack, behind all the other objects. Send forward and backwards will move an object up one layer at a time. So for example, if I select the trim and I Control B to send it to the back it's now under the flat. But if I use Send Forward instead of Send to Front, I'm just going to move it up one step. So now it's between the two. It's on top of the flat, but it's still under the door. So that's the difference between those. Those can be really useful when you start stacking up all kinds of things. Now let's fix the other issue. The offset put the trim on all 4 sides, including the bottom. We don't want it down there. So we can fix that with the interactive scaling. Remember, that's just the fancy way of clicking on a blue handle and yanking on it, right? So with the select tool active, hit your X key, make sure that you are in the interactive mode, and select the door trim rectangle. Now click on that bottom center control point and just push up the bottom until it snaps to the bottom edge of the door in the flat. Super easy, perfect. Okay, now undo, Control Command Z, undo, and let me show you another fun and handy tool. So we did it right, but I want to show you a different way to do this and introduce a new tool. So make sure that the trim rectangle is still selected, and then find the clip tool in the basic tool sets. The icon is supposed to look like an eraser. If you can't find it, then just use the shortcut Shift-N. It's this little guy over here. This new tool has new options in the mode bar, but again, the default settings are what we want. We're going to delete everything inside the selection. The second mode deletes everything outside of it, and the third just breaks the lines without deleting anything. And then we're going to use the default rectangle selection tool, but there is a polyline tool if you want to do irregular shapes, and a circle select mode as well. Those can be really handy. But leave all the settings alone and just touch the crosshairs to the lower left corner of the 4x8 rectangle until you see the bottom left screen hint. And then click and just move the selection marquee until it completely covers the overhang, and click again. Poof. Again, there's lots of other ways to do this, but for now, these are great. So these are super useful. Okay, so let's use the offset tool again. Hit the X key, your X key for your selection tool. Hit your X key to deselect the eraser tool or the clip tool. And then we're going to select the door rectangle. The door, not the trim, but the door. Okay, then we're going to find that offset tool again. That's the one that looks like the bow and arrow, remember. Now leave all the settings alone. But this time, click on the inside of the door rectangle. So move your cursor inside the rectangle and click. Now hit the X key when you're done. And this time we copied the original rectangle, but we made it smaller by 4 inches in all directions. And since it's smaller and it's on top, it's not covering up the door, so we don't need to send it forward or backwards or whatever like we did before. So now we have a single panel door with 4-inch rails and stiles. Let me show you another handy tool that we can use to add some trim to the top of our door flats. So find the double line tool. Its icon is pretty self-explanatory. It's 2 parallel lines. Now, there are some new icons in the mode bar, of course. So let's skip over these first ones for a moment, and let me find the separation field here. As you might guess, the number that you enter here is the distance between the 2 lines. So let's make a 6-inch board to serve as the trim, the molding up at the top of our wall here. So type in 6 into that field. Now take a look at this icon. It's a pencil and a wrench, or a spanner if you're from some part of the world that uses that word. Okay, this is the preferences icon, and it just means that this tool has a few more settings that you can change from a pop-up menu. Not all tools have preferences button, but many of them do. So click the preferences button, the pencil and the wrench, and then by default, the double line tool and its cool cousin, the double line polygon tool, do just what they say, and they draw 2 separate parallel lines. But if you click on the Create Polygons button up here in the top menu, then you'll be drawing a rectangle as wide as you set it in the separation. And it just caps off the ends of the 2 lines and makes it a rectangle instead of 2 loose lines. Sometimes you need 2 loose lines, but far more often, I'm using this super handy tool for drawing dimensional lumber, posts, planks, pickets, walls, and plan view, lots more. It's just great to be able to say, make it 4 inches and make it as long as I draw it. You know, that's really handy. So I typically just leave this setting on all times, and I switch it back in the rare occasions when I want 2 parallel lines. Vectorworks will keep this setting forever until you change it or upgrade your software in a year. So hit enter or click OK. And now just watch for a moment while I show you what those other mode buttons do. There are several tools that have these exact same options, so I'm just taking a second to show you these because these come up a lot. So if you look closely at the icons, they make sense. In this first mode, it's actually the one we want, it'll put the parallel lines below the 2 clicks. See how the top line has 2 dots at either end here in the icon? The next button will split the spacing half above and half below your clicks. And the next one puts the line above your clicks, and the last one lets you set a custom offset. Now watch how in the first mode, the left control mode, when I click the top left corner of the 4x8, it's just putting the 6-inch trim where we want it, down below that click. And I can reach up to the mode bar and select the center mode, and see how now it's like 3 inches above and below the top edge of the flat? In the third mode, it's putting the whole 6 inches above the flat. And I can just reach up here and click these buttons at any time. You can hit the I key to pop back through these if you want, but we'll leave that for later. So just like the 3 little icons show, we want to be in this first mode over here. We want to be in that left control mode. And so I'll go back over into that left mode and notice that we don't even need to type in the 4 feet. If I just put the little cursor near the top corner, the lines just snap to the 4-foot marks. As long as they're parallel or they're horizontal, then just go ahead and click, and then do that for yourself if you haven't done it already. So let's add a doorknob before we wrap up this video. Find the rounded rectangle tool. Another self-descriptive icon. The tool works just like the regular rectangle tool, but it rounds over the corners. With the rounded rectangle tool selected, come down over here and click in the bottom left corner of the door, tab in the X field and enter 3, and then tab again and enter 10, and enter, or left click, to set the shape of the escutcheon plate of the door hardware. So over in the object info, you can find this corner menu. It's just switch from proportional to symmetrical. So when you do that, you'll see that there's a diameter X and Y fields that appear below. Just type in 2 into either one of those. They're going to be the same since we selected symmetrical. And notice that the corners of the rectangles are rounded a bit more. So now move Command or Control M with this rectangle selected. Just hit the Control M command and type in 0.5 in the X field. You can also type in 1/2. That'll still read as half an inch, but 0.5 is great. So 0.5 in the X and tab to enter 30 in the Y. So it's going to scooch it over half an inch and it's going to put it up 30 inches. That will scoot the plate over and be centered on our style, and it's going to move it up 2 foot 6 inches. And now find the circle tool. It's a test to see if you can figure out the icon for the circle tool. So when you find the circle tool, select it, and its default mode is radial mode, so clicking from the center outward. So just double check that it's still that mode, unless you've been playing with it on your own. And then just touch the cursor to the top. Zoom in with your scroll wheel if you need to. So zoom in a little bit, put your cursor right there near the top of the escutcheon plate, the rounded rectangle, and then scroll in a little bit, and then just touch the cursor to the top center of the rounded rectangle, and you'll see that screen hint for top center. Without clicking, just gently move the cursor straight down toward the middle of the rounded rectangle, and you should see a green dashed extension line and a hint that says aligned horizontal. That's letting you know that your cursor is directly below the top center of the rectangle. About halfway between the top center and the center of the rounded rectangle is a little plus mark right there showing where the center is. It's about halfway between those two, a third of the way down, maybe a quarter of the way down, whatever. Just click once, and while you are still horizontally aligned, you see that green dash, go ahead and click, and then move the cursor and draw a 2 or 3 inch diameter circle. So you can tab and you get the length, but it's going to be the radius. So if you want a 2 inch, type in 1 or 1.5 for 3 inch, whatever you want. And then just click when you like the size. Congratulations! You have learned the essential concepts about half of the basic tools. I know we only used a few of the tools, but the oval tool, the arc, the polygon, the line tool, and several others work very much like the tools you've already learned. So save your file, and in the next video, we'll learn how to use the attributes palette to control our line and fill appearance. And I'll show you the basics of the dimension tool so we can turn our stack of rectangles into an actual piece of drafting. And I know these first tutorials seem like you're moving slowly, but trust me, the pace picks up fast. These first 4 tutorials, you're learning tons of foundational stuff that you're going to use constantly. And once you're comfortable with that, the rest is just learning more powerful tools and commands until you can draw anything you want quickly and precisely. So keep going. You're doing great.